forever. Eternity.
You don't need people anymore.
Nothing you can do about it.
Content.
Nothing you can do.
Content.
You will be mashed up, cut up, repackaged for someone else's need.
And the world's largest media company creates no content.
Yeah, we're not producing the content. We're allowing users to share.
I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly.
I want to know what they're talking about amongst themselves, and I want to spread that content to the people who aren't this content yet.
It's normal for some things to come to your attention.
And we're back for another episode of Are We Content, where I'm your host. They call me Mr. X indeed, but you can call me Chud. All right, look, today's date is April 8th of 2024. If you're listening to this in the future, that will probably mean nothing to you. But currently, that is a date that a lot of people have been waiting for because we were expecting a total eclipse, solar eclipse here in the United States. And there was a lot of stuff that's been floating around the outskirts of that as a subject. And as me and Bob talk about the sky all the time, we can't miss this. So we've got to talk about it, especially when he's in the central location for viewing it. But some of the things that people have been talking about are the National Guard was being deployed in many states. They were closing schools. They were telling people to stock up on food for 2 weeks, get your gas tanks full. We had people comparing it to the New Madrid earthquakes of 1811, where there was multiple solar eclipses in the United States that year, I believe, which was also had a comet that was flying around at the same time, which is exactly what's going on this year at this time. There's a green horned comet out there. The path of this eclipse is going through multiple cities with the same names, a couple of which are even Nineveh, which is a biblical name that had to do with the judgment of God, and Jonah and the whale. There are people that are saying that the paths of the last 3 eclipses that have gone through the United States created the letters Aleph and Tav, the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There are astrological planet alignments and astrology that people were concerned about. NASA is even firing 3 rockets at this thing. This list goes on that I have in my hand, and it is only the tip of the iceberg, people. The rockets themselves were named after a serpent god, which is known to eat the sun. It's pretty far out. We had CERN was firing up to full power with their Hadron Collider. And that project is called the White Rabbit Project, I believe. I mean, it just keeps going. And then on top of that, just adjacent to this eclipse is in Israel, we have the red heifer going on, where they have procured cattle from the United States to take over there, and they're going to sacrifice them on the Mount of Olives to facing towards the former Temple of Solomon in order for that to be rebuilt. It's out of fucking control. So we've got to talk about this. With me, as always, is our resident skeptic himself, Moral Bob. But we brought in from down under, we've got Drew Missing from Missing the Point podcast. Drew, Bob, how are you guys doing tonight?
Man, fucking good. I finally got home. It took me 2.5 hours to make an hour-long drive.
This is because you're in the central viewing point for this eclipse. Holy
shit,
we're talking
dude,
about.
They said there was like 2 million extra people in the area. Some shit like that.
Right.
Fucking insane.
Mm-hmm.
You survived the zombie apocalypse, Bob. I'm so impressed. Did you have like a big cow catcher on the front of your car and just plow through? Is that what happened? I should have. I need to just get, I mean, we don't have them down here. We don't have snow plows necessarily down here. But I should get one for the front of my truck and just make everybody move out of the way, because God, today was miserable, man. It literally took me 2.5 hours to make an hour-long drive.
Oh, I can imagine driving through a larger city like Seattle, even if there's a football game or a baseball game, or if, God forbid, both are happening at the same time, shit just gets absolutely out of control. But you say 2 million extra visitors. I mean, that brings it to one of the first points that I made in my intro there, is that they were saying they were deploying the National Guard in places like that. Did you see any signs of that?
No. One of my guys told me that he heard that a bunch of billionaires got into a bunker in Oklahoma and the National Guard was sent there to protect those billionaires. You know, I don't put a lot of weight in the bullshit that's just kind of thrown out there. So I'm just like, I don't know, whatever. I gotta go to work. So
yeah, right.
Whatever.
Right.
But
all of our
2
lives.
million. You said 2 million extra people. Isn't that an average border crossing in any given month in America at the moment?
Right. Dude, it was crazy. I mean, the people were losing their mind. We're at the job site, dude, and we could hear people like cheering when the eclipse started, when it reached like full capacity, when the sun was completely blocked by the moon. There was fireworks and shit. Like it got about as dark as it is right now. Like it got fucking dark.
So the sun came back. So I'm guessing Biden sacrificed a baby at the White House to make the sun return. Is that what's happened in the States?
I mean, I think he does that every day. So I don't know that.
What do you think he drinks for breakfast?
This is fucking crystal meth and baby's blood.
Well,
just to keep him going. It's like that movie. What's that movie? Crank or whatever, where the dude has to just like keep doing fucking blow and shit to keep going.
He's that way with baby's blood.
Right.
So I guess as we get started, Bob, you were there. Did you look at it? Did you see it?
Of course.
Was it amazing? Was it stupid? Was it just nothing?
So, I mean, I always watch an eclipse when it happens and I can view it, right?
Right.
So I looked up at it as I could and, focused a little more when it was getting closer to the moon, the moon. I say that because we don't know that it's the fucking moon.
Nobody's ever seen the moon
goes in front of the sun. Well, you don't see it approach or leave.
You can't see it on the day of an eclipse. It always happens on a new moon, always, from what I can see.
Right, and theoretically, that's when the moon is closest to the sun, and theoretically, that's when the moon is being lapped by the sun, right? Because the sun laps the moon every 28 days. So the fact that this happens really isn't that rare. It's just that people were told to focus on it. But yeah, I watched it with my bare eyes, and there were people out there kind of like putting their glasses on. I was like, man, just fucking look at it. Like it's not gonna hurt you. And I watched it, and so this was the crazy thing, right? So you had the moon come in, and it came in from this way, right? And completely covered, and you see this little crescent at the end that was basically on, I guess, I don't know what direction, maybe the north side. If you're standing there looking up, it was north that the crescent was on. And it gets completely covered, but then it was like the moon started going up. And so then the crescent started coming at the bottom instead of the opposite side, right? It's not like the moon just passed over the sun. The moon came in, blocked the sun, and then started leaving in a different fucking trajectory.
Now that is fascinating.
That was crazy. I saw that and I was like, fucking wait a minute. That's what? And sure as shit, as soon as I was like, I had some other workers around me. And I was like, another superintendent was next to me. I said, dude, do you see that? He's like, what? I said, the moon's leaving in a different trajectory than it came in. And he's like, what the fuck? And no shit, not 5 minutes later, complete overcast, never saw the sun again the rest of the day.
Really?
Yep.
It's like Eclipse 2024 Tokyo Drift.
Yeah, did not get to completely see it exit the sun. Yeah, but it was going in a different fucking direction.
That's very interesting. It's also interesting that it got cloudy afterwards. That's great that it was clear enough for you to be able to see during it. We should have been able to see a partial here, but I couldn't even tell the exact location of the sun during the time of it today.
Yeah.
Although it is notable, maybe notable. It's notable to me that it was really pouring rain this morning. I mean, just coming down and down and down to the point where just before the time of the eclipse, I needed to come in and change my outer clothes because I was just getting too wet. I was going to start getting cold. So I came in, and when I went back out, I was in for 15, 20 minutes. And when I went back out, it had stopped raining. I was like, oh, cool. Maybe. maybe I'm going to be able to see something. And I start kind of walking around the property looking for, can I see the location of the sun through these clouds? And during that time, man, did the wind pick up. I was going, oh, is this related? Oh boy. I mean, it was like stormy level winds, not crazy, but it was like, oh, a storm's coming in, which never really happened. It just petered out after a little while. And it really sounded like the wind was coming from the south. I was out in the woods and it sounded like it was coming from essentially what we're told is your direction there, Bob. Like that's where the wind sounded like it was coming through. But once I came out, I looked at my weather vane and I could feel the wind on my face, and it was all coming from the north. So, but that went away. I didn't feel an atmospheric change beyond that, because that was the other thing I was just looking for. Even if I can't see the sun or any of this activity, does it feel different out? Do my chickens act different? Does the critters around me act different? But I couldn't see any of that.
Yeah, it was weird. I was able to talk to a couple of the guys that I know are kind of thinkers. I work in construction, so there's not very many of them. But there was one guy that I talked to a bit, and he's a young dude. He's like early 20s, but he's got a head on his shoulders. Like he thinks. And I was like, Mark, you're a thinker. I said, if the moon is 240,000 miles away and the sun is 93 million miles away, how does it block it out to where it gets dark? And he was like, huh, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I said, it is, isn't it?
Well,
I said if our sun is here, our moon's here, and it's little, and then Earth is here, and it's bigger than the moon, how the fuck is it blocking out the light? The light is coming from this giant fucking object. And he was like, fuck, I don't know. I was like, think about it. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how it blocks out just a single part of the northern hemisphere. If it was that perfect distance where it can eclipse the sun and be that like miracle distance away from the sun in between the earth, that golden zone as they call it, how does it only block out a small little path? How does it not block out the entirety of the earth for a certain amount of time?
It seems like it should. It really seems like it should. And that's one of the first questions that all people who don't really question, I'll just say everything, that they should be taking note is like if you just believe in the model as we're told, is NASA's model of the Earth and the sun and the moon and the solar system, that is a wild coincidence that, I don't know, what is it they say, that the sun is 400 times larger than the moon and 400 times farther away. Right. So it makes it's just perfect. It hits that. And even if you are
absolute statistical impossibility.
And if you're believing in that, then you probably believe in things like they say that the moon used to be much closer and that it's slowly been moving farther and farther away from us. So eclipses would have been something different thousands of years ago than they are now, and they'll be different in thousands of years from now. And all this last few weeks with people talking about eclipses on every single reel on Instagram, I've heard some interesting things that people are saying, whether or not they're true, such as that there is no other rocky planet in our solar system that can have an eclipse. Mars, their moons are too small. The inner planets, they're too close, or don't have moons. There's all these reasons that we're real special. We're really, really special, that we're the only ones who get that. And we're so insanely special that they happen to be at these perfect distances to make that perfect cover that we see, or we're told.
And trackable. You can predict them ahead of time because you know mathematically when they're going to occur.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the strange thing. Very strange thing.
Which it's just all silly. One of my other guys that was there, I said, it was dark as fuck. And I said, notice the temperature didn't change?
Mm.
And he goes, huh. I said, the temperature changes when a cloud goes in front of the sun. It just got blocked out by the moon. Why is it the same temperature? And he was like, fuck, I don't know.
Bob, you just hit...
I just like dropping little fucking nuggets, dude.
You're going to just send him down a rabbit hole now. You just hit on something that was the main reason why they shot up the APEP rockets. According to NASA and their kind of reasoning, they put rockets up during the eclipse to try and test the temperature of the atmosphere before, during, and after. Why would you need to do it during eclipse? Couldn't you do it, I don't know, at sunset or at
night.
sunrise?
Yeah.
Or at night, any time of the day?
Any time. Yeah, like it. Why is that the reason for shooting those rockets? Now, we all know that if that event did happen, which I'm not sure it did, I think it's just to get us to fucking chase our tails.
Yeah.
They know people like us are out there, so they just throw a bunch of shit out there to get people to lose their fucking minds. And I doubt they even did that shit. I doubt why is NASA gonna waste their goddamn money doing that? They're not gonna do that.
I think you're really onto something there with like that long list that I read off at the beginning of this. I think that most of what I read is total bullshit. Like,
right.
I'm all for a good conspiracy. Don't get me wrong. And I also think that eclipses might be one of the most important things that we can observe with our eyes. However, like the paths of the eclipse of the last three, when laid over each other, making the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. I thought that was interesting. I'm going to look into that. So I looked into it. I'm not a great researcher. I didn't go real deep, but what I quickly found is that first, I searched the Hebrew alphabet. And I look first. Actually, no. First, I searched what people are saying these patterns, these paths look like, and I go, okay, it looks kind of like a sideways A and a sort of twisted X or a T, and I go, okay, that's fascinating. But then I look up the Hebrew alphabet itself, and like the Wikipedia page gave me like 30 different versions of the Hebrew alphabet, and I scrolled through all of them. And none of those the beginning or end letters, the Aleph and Tav, looked anything like those shapes. They didn't. So then I go, wait, so where are they getting these shapes? Like, what are these shapes from? Well, I guess it's American Hebrew. And that's where I stopped my research. But that's because I ran out of time. But, then I got all these next questions of how long has American Hebrew been around? Be very interesting if we had a prophecy that was, since the dawn of time, if these are like clockwork and we know they're going to happen, and God told them to cross in these paths so that we could see the beginning, because people are saying the first and last letter means the beginning of the end, right? So if this was a message from God, he really, like, it was important that we get this American version of Hebrew to line up with the way he had set these eclipses to run and all these other things, to the point where I even question if is American Hebrew even a real thing, but what do you guys think of all that?
Well, I think that this goes to the extent of it. I was on a podcast yesterday for 6 hours talking about this. And what you ran over at the start was pretty much what we discussed at full length. And I think it all comes down to, yes, there's symbolism. Yes, there's esoteric things. A lot of the elites of the world love that symbolism, and they deliberately shove it in our faces because they believe in it. They enjoy it. But the ultimate problem is, if you look for something, you're inevitably going to find it, whether it's there or not. You can find connections in pretty much everything. Like you gave the equivalency of the Hebrew alphabet. The Hebrew alphabet has that many variations. It's going to be likely that some of them are going to look like the path designations and the areas. We can connect dots as truthers, air quotes, very easily when we know what to look for. And sometimes we really split hairs when we're finding this stuff.
Yes.
Ultimately, I think this was a hypnotic reset, not in a conspiratorial type of way. The media does it, governments do it to a way where they redirect your gaze at something or your attention. They pump it in the media. It's almost like a sleight of hand. If we're all focusing on that, we're not focusing on real things like in America, the border issue. You're not focusing on cost of living crisis, all these things that are actually affecting our day to day, we forget about because the sun got blocked out for 4 minutes.
Yeah, right.
People were talking about this at length for weeks before now.
It's so
it's taken up so much attention.
People were saying the rapture was coming. And I just keep commenting on all these posts, like, stop getting distracted so easily. Like, this is clearly a distraction because this is what's being massively pushed to the front. Like,
well, it's
like,
Scooby snacks for
right.
truthers. I mean, we can't get enough. I mean, like seriously, this
so
list that I was reading at the beginning basically gives me a conspiracy boner. You know, it's like, oh my God, it's all the things, man. It's all the things.
Don't get me wrong. I love talking about all this stuff. Do I think anything was actually going to happen? Not really.
No,
and if it was going to happen, I know the government's probably done it. It's not a natural event.
It's like Y2K, right? Like, everybody lost their mind about it. Like, everybody thought that there was going to be this big, crazy fucking thing that happened. And then everybody just got up the next day and kept doing what they were doing the day before. And everything was fine.
Right.
Like it ended up not being a thing. And it's like, how many times do you guys have to live through this shit before you realize that these events are not the big fucking crazy thing that were being sold? And it would be really fucking interesting to find out what the government was doing today.
Right.
Like, what were they passing bills? Were they passing the budget? Were they like, what the fuck were they doing when everybody was looking at the sky?
And this is the sad thing, that I think anyone who says they know for sure and they go through a whole heap of research and they are definitive on something, there's no way you can be definitive on any one thing. You can have an informed guess and you can look at your data points and the information you've researched, that's fine. But a lot of people are so steadfast on they know. And I saw on a Twitter feed before, there's a Q group and they said that today was the day the Trump presidency was going to come back and take over and the military were going to walk out.
Christ.
Well, that didn't occur. Everyone's hounding them and bagging them out now, saying it hasn't happened. Or the day's not over yet.
Right.
I'm like, so what happens at the end of the day? Will you admit you're wrong? Can we go there yet? Not quite.
Well, see, here's the thing. Here's an observation I'll make, is that I think a lot of these dates that people are given, events that we anticipate, even if something did happen today that was big, maybe we started the Great Reset. Maybe this was the beginning of the end, but none of us are going to know that. It's not going to be. It's that incrementalism that I'm always talking about, right? It's something. If something happened, like so, do you guys remember? I think it was October 7th or 4th. There was a thing that was happening here, at least in the United States. I don't know about over there, Drew, but they were doing a test of the emergency cell phone network.
I remember that. And
there were people saying, "Oh, it's going to trigger the zombie apocalypse." Similar to what we just what we were telling people were saying for today. And there was a load of people, specifically within our truth or conspiracy world, that were saying, "Don't believe the hype. That's a bunch of bullshit, blah, 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 blah." Well, I personally believe a lot of things about frequencies. I believe a lot of things about cell towers and cell phones. And that, these are just personal beliefs. And I'm one of those people that I did shut off my phone. I shut off my phone and we turned off our Wi-Fi and we just kind of shut it all off for the hour that was happening. And then when it was done, we turned it back on and we didn't get our notifications like a lot of people, I guess, did. I never really checked up too much with other people. And of course, nothing happened. There was no zombie apocalypse. But I do think they can do things with frequencies. And I think they could have very well that day, at that time, done something that affected, maybe like people were saying at the time, affecting all the people who were vaccinated or all the people who were unvaccinated or all this or all that. Something could have affected people, but it's going to happen in such a way that it doesn't happen at that minute. It's not like people turn into zombies. But maybe it started an effect, or maybe they did that to signal off a new frequency, like that things are working at just a slightly different frequency that's gonna tweak with our bodies and our food and our minds just a little different than it did before. Maybe they turned up the microwaves just a notch right at that moment, and that was kind of a send off for it. But that's the
beauty of hindsight, isn't it? Like, you don't know in the moment that a big historical event has happened.
Right.
When you look back, you do. Like when we saw the planes hit the towers, right? Supposedly,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't know that would be 20 years of a war on terror.
Mm-hmm.
We just knew an attack had happened. We didn't know the implications of what it was going to be for the next 2 decades.
Right.
So something small can happen and be a huge historical event after the fact, but we don't know in the moment ultimately.
Mm-hmm. And there could have been people at CERN or Joe Biden or in some small group of people in a esoteric circle that did something today during that eclipse that was in an essence to usher in a new era or end one or begin one, or I don't, who knows what this could have been. That could have happened and none of us would know.
Well, they had to have done a sacrifice ritual at Bilderberg or fucking
somebody did something. I'm sure of it because they love this astronomical shit.
They chanted to Moloch or whatever. I mean, I love conspiracies. I love all of this stuff. It's super entertaining, but I now view all of this shit like a Fast and Furious movie. Sure, it's entertaining, but it's meaningless. Like it's not really done well. Like most of the conspiracies that get thrown out these days, they've got tons of holes in them. But I'll spend a little time thinking about it. Like, yeah, okay, fucking what if? But I just, it's all entertainment as I see it now, because at the end of the day, it's all just to draw your attention. And if any of it, because I remember the notification thing, right? But I have all of my emergency notifications turned off. I didn't get one.
Oh, and you didn't?
Nope. It was
that was one of the things at that time.
I didn't get one.
They were saying that it didn't matter. Didn't matter if you had them turned off. This one was going to come through. And I'll tell you, I just got one the other night, like an Amber Alert. And, not to sound like a cold-hearted bastard who doesn't care about children, but if I'd known that was coming, I would have been happy to turn my phone off to not get it. I don't really want any notifications coming from anyone that I'm not in personal contact with. I'd rather be removed from that list if I could.
Right.
It's like I turned mine off and I didn't get the notification. If I'd known that I wasn't going to get the notification, I wouldn't have. But they were issuing just on that one. They were telling people to be sure if you're a domestic abuse victim, be sure to turn off your phone, because if you have a second phone, so your husband doesn't know, your husband who beats the shit out of you doesn't know you're contacting, someone to help you, be sure to turn that off, because he's going to find it that night or that day, whatever time of day that was supposed to be. They were putting the warnings out like crazy. And what I think all of this with the eclipse, all of these things, it's like I said, it's Scooby snacks for truthers, right? Like It is there to feed us and get us fat and get us lazy and get us to not really be thinking about things. But then I think there's another side to that too, that's for the normies to see people who do lose their minds about these things and then go, see? We talked about it when the three of us talked about Y2K a while back, and it was like, I don't know, everyone let their guard down after that, because only the crazy people really thought that was going to happen. And then they all went right into the system. We wouldn't have had those notifications if people hadn't gone into the digital system the way they did after Y2K. Right. So now after we hear all these conspiracies and none of it happens, or no one can tell that anything happened, next time there's an eclipse, that's the one I'd be looking at.
Well, because it's just to get everybody to fall for the shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just to get people to fall for it. So what they're proving is that all they have to do is put something out there at a mass scale, and people will lose their fucking minds.
Mm-hmm.
And it does a very subtle indoctrination to you. To the weak-minded people, it does this subtle indoctrination to where you don't trust yourself. You don't know what to trust. You don't then you constantly have this subconscious, unknowing feeling. You don't feel secure in anything because you don't know. Well, what if they tell us something and it does happen this time? you start looking at it as like the boy who cried wolf. You don't want to like ignore it because maybe one of these times it will happen. And
if you're thinking about frequencies too, Bob, that puts people in a state of perpetual anxiety. And what does that do at a large scale to society, right? And one demographic I've seen it hit really hard on the last couple of weeks is the born again Christian groups.
Oh, yeah.
And I've said this multiple times because I've only found faith myself as well, but every generation as Christians thought they were living in the end times. Everyone interprets scripture and the metaphors and the messages from the Bible as applying to their time period when they're alive, which is fine. You can look at that stuff. But if you know the outcome of being a Christian is you're going to be saved anyway and Christ is coming back, why worry yourself and be concerned about what the bad guys are doing? Because if you know you're going to win, why do you have to get so anxious and scared about something that ultimately doesn't matter?
Well, dude, even the times of Jesus Christ, people were screaming, this is the end times. This was prophesized. We were going to get a Messiah. This was prophesized. This is going to be when everything changes. And it didn't. Sure, Jesus existed, did what he did, but then he was crucified, but then everything kind of just went on. There was no massive trajectory change when that happened, where everything just fucking completely changed and, you know, Caesar wasn't able to be Caesar anymore, or fucking whatever. Like, everything just kept going the way that it was going.
Yeah, everything just rebranded.
It was just this blip. And it was just a blip that we've focused on. Like, that's it. Like, if they weren't, and you know, I don't believe anything, so I need to preface that before I say this. But, you know, I've always said, regardless of what you think, there was a dude named Jesus of Nazareth or whatever the fuck his name was. There was a cat that went through that shit, right? Like, there was, historically speaking, there was a dude that everybody thought was the Messiah, and he was fucking persecuted and hung on a cross. Like, whether he was or wasn't is irrelevant. Like, historically, that shit fucking happened, right? But if that's as much as you look at it, it's just a nothing on the radar. It's fucking nothing. You just look back and you go, oh, this dude thought he was the son of God and got fucking hung on a cross. That's weird.
And that shows the level of how much of a hook this whole eclipse was. It got Christians to focus on it. It got New Agers to focus on it. People out charging crystals in the sunlight before it happened. We had conspiracy theorists deep diving it for months on end. It hooked every major demographic of what you would consider to be critical thinkers, so heavily focused on something they didn't need to spend all that time on. Is it fun? Yes. Is it great going down those rabbit holes? Absolutely. But I think the best of us would know that it's not going to affect your average day. Until I see jackboot thugs kicking my door in, or troops on the streets, or the sun blacks out for an hour straight, that's when I'll begin to worry.
Yeah.
Not
the only thing that changed today is that when it got dark, for about a couple minutes before and a couple minutes after, everybody stopped working. Everybody stopped working for like 10 minutes. And we're like, whoa, this is fucking weird. All right. Like, all the noises stopped, and all you heard was cheering in the distance, because we were by a famous barbecue place that's way out in the fucking hill country. And you could hear them cheering, and I just kept shaking my head like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Man,
I'd argue... Then I looked the other direction, and there was fireworks. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
that's so American. Seriously, let's celebrate an eclipse with fireworks.
Do these fucking idiots
let's fire some rockets
understand? At it. Yeah, like, do these fucking morons not understand that this actually happens quite frequently? Like, it's not that rare.
So, Bob, you and I talk about that all the time. We just had an eclipse, a solar eclipse last October as well.
Yeah.
And I watched it. I was trying to get I think we probably talked about it on here, that I was pulling coworkers out and getting them to look at it, and they're just kind of like, oh, okay, who cares? You know, and right back to it. And I'm like, man, we should all be like paying attention to this. This is one of our gifts that we got. We all can share this. This is like pretty cool. And but then there's times where no one cares, and then there's times where they tell everyone to care. And there's, but let me back up and say, like with the other one, when no one's caring, there's a part of me that's going, I wish everyone would just stop working and be quiet. Let's all, as humanity, just for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, let's all just be quiet and look at the same thing and like kind of be one big conscious family of humanity, you know, or something.
Right, just look
like
at
that.
it and go, man, isn't that fucking cool? Like, regardless of what you think it was, what you think it may be, whatever, it's pretty cool. Like, it's a cool event.
And I think a thing like an eclipse would be a good one for that. But when I talk about how they don't want us to, or I don't know that they don't want us to, there are times where they want us to all put our energy into it. I think that's interesting, especially, you know, I was talking about frequency earlier. I also feel that, you know, human frequency is an energy. And they got a lot of people to focus on the same thing. They get a lot of people to focus on the Super Bowl all at once, right? This was a whole lot of people focusing on the sky all at once. Like, I think there's room for some esoteric shit to be going on. That's why I figure that someone sacrificed something in a round room with an altar in the middle. You know,
what about this? CERN is actually absorbing energy. So they turned CERN on when everyone was focused on something. Everyone was heightened and freaked out. They were just sucking the life force out of us.
For sure, could be. CERN could be what's causing this shit. What causes an eclipse? Because those paths generally don't cross. Like, who fucking knows, really, right? Here's two things. So, one, the coincidence between the last two eclipses is that the moon entered and exit in different fucking trajectories. I don't know if you remember, Chud, but I think I mentioned it on that podcast that I watched the moon come in. It hit like part of it and then like dipped out in a different fucking direction.
Right.
And it was like, wait a minute, what the fuck?
Yeah, we compared notes real carefully, and you saw it do one thing and I saw it do something else, and both of them weren't lining up with what the NASA model tells us.
Right. And so then the other thing is that like anybody listening, vampires exist, and they don't suck blood, man. They suck your energy. The blood is an allegory. And you got to be really fucking careful to the vampires that are fucking sucking your shit away. Absolutely. I think if a lot of us focused, and I'm guilty of it too, I'm not going to claim innocence of wasting fucking time and energy. If we all spent half the time that we focus on nonsense, doing something productive and moving us forward, we would live in a better place. Like fuck, man, there's people that spend like 10 hours a day staring at their goddamn phones. Imagine if all of those people were tending to a garden or donating time to a fucking nursing home or fucking raising animals or whatever, right? Half of that time they waste on whatever bullshit. They actually focus that time on something productive. The world would be a different place. And the oligarchs that run this shit know that. They fucking are well aware that if they can steal your attention for just a little while, then they can get you to focus more and more of that attention on that little thing that they got you to look at.
Yeah, that energy vampire concept, I think that's what a lot of what all the powers that be that get us into all these different things, whether it would be just as simple as the phones themselves, whether it be as simple as the television or even the radio or even maybe the newspaper back in the day, you know, just getting us to put our energy into something other than what we naturally would be in our own lives. But instead, our lives aren't our own natural lives anymore. Everything's coming at us at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we have something to pacify us at all times. That's the real, I guess, problem that I see in the world today. I hate to sound all doomy like that, but you know, it's that's if I've got a problem with the world today, it's that everyone's being too busy being pacified with stupid stuff that's stealing their time and their energy, and that's being done by energy vampires, as far as I'm concerned.
I'd like to get your take on this, guys. That the major kind of things I can see come out of this eclipse is that certain cities declared a state of emergency, in which point those cities actually get funding from the federal government over there, as is my understanding. They shut schools. Is this more of just a way of priming society to get us ready for climate lockdowns? Because they locked down schools during COVID. They locked down schools. They shut schools for a goddamn eclipse that was only 4 minutes long. Is this just getting us ready for, oh no, you need to stay at home because Big Daddy government says so? And that could be for like, I don't know, a rain front, whatever. They're going to keep pushing like this climate scam in a way to control people. Could that be a possibility that's priming us?
Oh, I think so.
Of course, man. It's for sure to look. It's to get people programmed to look to the government first. What do? What's the answer? Oh, let's look to government. Let's look to these people. They're the experts. They're the ones in control. They must deserve to be there because they're the ones in control. So if they say it's a state of emergency, we need to take that seriously. If they say that this event only happens once in every 600 years, well, I guess it only happens once in every 600 years. It's just to divert everything away to a single point that is the government, the rulers, the controllers, gods, whatever the fuck you want to call them. It's all to divert that away. So who was it? Oh shit, man. I don't know if we talked about it on here, but somebody said that we live in cyclical times, right? And it's the mother, the father, the infant. And it's this cycle of mother, father, infant, right? And we're in the infancy time, right? Which would make sense because what do infants always need, right?
Pacifiers.
They need mom.
Someone to do something for them.
They need a nipple. They need something to suck off of. They can't do anything for themselves, right? Infants are fucking, solely dependent on the parent. Well, what do they call the government? The nanny state? Like
Big Daddy government.
Big Daddy government. Like we are living in this infancy time where nobody can think for themselves, nobody can do for themselves. And I think that does also lead to the cyclical time of hard times make hard men make good times make soft men make hard times.
The fourth turning.
I think those two cycles are basically intertwined. They're basically called different things, but it's the same cycle of shit, right?
It's like a micro and a macro.
Hard times make hard men is the paternal time. That's the father time. And then the hard men make good times is the maternal time, right? Or even the infancy time, maybe.
Well, probably the mother, and then the mother time makes the infant time.
Infancy.
Right.
Which brings us into hard times.
It brings us into hard times.
Yeah. I'm following you.
Right. So it's father, mother, infant. And that's hard times make hard men make good times make soft men make hard times. And it's this fucking cycle that just goes around and around. And I think we have been in this cycle. Like, my leading theory is that the people that control everything, they know the cycles, right? And they're trying to stay in the cycle where they have the most wealth and power for the longest period of time. And so they're trying to perpetuate that part of the cycle and make it as long, because then they have to get work in the other parts, right? They still get to run everything. Right.
They're the overbearing mother that's trying to keep their 8-year-old a little kid when they're trying to grow up. They're keeping us in the house. They don't want us to go outside and go out and play in the dirt. They want us to stay inside. It's like
the creepy mom mother. It's the creepy mom that still nurses her fucking 5-year-old, right?
They want you to keep. They want their children to keep their family as their core, as opposed to branch out and have their own friends and relationships outside of the family. They want to keep you trapped in there, which is, boy, I'm not sounding. I'm not sounding very much like I'm on The World as It Is Today when I'm talking about trapped in your family.
Right.
It's almost worse
I have
than
contradictions with that too.
Yeah.
It's like a Munchausen's by proxy. It's like the mother that's slowly poisoning her child to keep them in the house.
Right.
Like, can you hear about those like Dateline stories where the mother's been poisoning their breakfast, their porridge each morning, and the kid's sick, and then the mother has that protective role? Well, that's what the government and society's been doing to people for a hell of a long time now. They're poisoning us with our food, the technology, our clothing, everything. And it keeps us dependent on the state or the mother to survive.
Well, Chud, you made the analogy the other night, which I forget who it was too. I think it was Murray Rothbard or something, where it was like, look, if the government took over making shoes for everybody, it wouldn't be 2 generations before everybody would be like, well, we have to have the government because nobody knows how to make shoes.
Yeah.
Like
nobody knows
it
how
would be
we
very fucking
figure
quick.
it out.
Right. It would be very quick where you didn't. And I think the analogy was actually, it might not have been shoes. I think the original analogy is if you offloaded the burden of teaching your kid how to walk to the government, within a couple generations, you would say, well, we can't learn how to walk without the government. It
need
has
Wally
to be there
floating
because
chairs.
how else would we learn how to walk? But then I think it was Harry Brown that brilliantly said, the government is the kind of group that will break your legs and give you crutches and go, see, without us, you wouldn't be able to walk.
Right. Yeah. Harry Brown's, I love that quote because that gets at the core of what a lot of people, when they're begging for daddy government, they're saying, yeah, but they give us crutches. Come on, guys. They're ignoring the fact that we have broken legs, let alone examining how did our legs break, but they're praising the one who's giving us the crutches.
Right. It's all slow indoctrination where it's just, whether it's the fucking Amber Alert or, we'll protect you from the Eclipse or whatever. It's all this offloading of this responsibility to the higher power. And okay, cool. And religion does it too. It's like, oh, well, it's God's plan. I hate that shit so much because I'll see people that are successful and they're like, oh, God really blessed me. And it's like, wait, you're negating all the fucking work you did though. Like, I watched you build this fucking business and you're just giving all the credit to God when I fucking was there. Like, I watched it happen, dude. You're not giving yourself enough credit for the work that you've put it in. Sure, I'm not saying that if you believe in God and all of that shit, not to thank him for blessing you with the strength to push through in the hard times or whatever, but don't fucking negate your own fucking work that you've put in. Like, and that's what we need to do. We've just offloaded all of the heavy shit to something else instead of carrying it. Instead of letting that be on us. Yeah, I fucking put that work in. Yes, I can figure this shit out without the government telling me there's an Amber Alert or an eclipse coming. Like I can do this. Like, I've got it. And we've gotten to the point to where nobody thinks that way anymore. Like, at least not as society.
In a microcosm of that, Bob, you look at organized religions. Organized religions, you outsource your responsibility of researching your own faith to a priest or a preacher. They do it all for you. You just sit in the pew, you listen, and you go home. That's never what it was supposed to be intended to do. You're supposed to read the book yourself, and people outsource it, just like people outsource what they need from the government, and they trust the government's going to do it.
Just like with the government too, when you do your own research in the Bible and you come to your own conclusions, try bringing that to the government or to the pastor or the preacher and tell him, hey, I disagree with what you said on Sunday. Look, this is how I'm reading it. They're going to say,
you're a fucking blasphemer.
Yeah. Why don't you get out of here?
Yeah.
We don't.
Or the government. I read the Constitution. You can't actually do this. No, you're wrong. There's a law. There's a statute. It covers it. You're wrong.
Plus, we just did it. So you can't say we can't do that. Right.
Right.
Hey, so since we're talking about religion, I think we have to. We have 3 men right here, right now, all with red beards. We have to talk about the red heifers. What do you guys know about the red heifers? You guys know anything about this? You know, zero?
I know
Texas is part of the story.
I know a stupid amount about it.
There's a lot of cattle here, so I'd imagine.
So I don't know. I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm far from it. But it's very fascinating. I think this is way heavier than anything that had to do with the eclipse. And I don't know if it means anything or not, but there's something here, and it's not just a bunch of people on social media talking about it. This is something that has thousands of years in the working, possibly. This is something that at least three major religions are all looking at and are all very interested in. And that is the prophecy of the red heifer, which to my basic understanding is that where there are to be 3 heifers that are of only red hairs. No, they have to be inspected, not a single white or black or brown. They all have to be red. And this was a very difficult feat to find these. They also needed no blemishes. They couldn't have ever given birth. They needed to be within a certain age. They could never have been yoked. They could never have been used as work cows or anything like that. And these are very, very hard to come by. And people apparently have been looking for them for 2,000 years. Seems like a long time to not find something that does exist. They were found in Texas, someplace in Texas, by some people from Israel. They went there, they inspected them, they determined them to be the proper cattle. They went through a bunch of legal stuff to get these reclassified, not as cattle, farm, or work animals, but instead pets, so that they could be transported to Israel. They have now been transported to Israel, where they have a altar. I'm told they've set up an altar on the Mount of Olives facing the Temple Mount, where the Temple of Solomon once existed, and which was torn down in like 70 AD. And in order to usher in the rebuilding of that temple, they are going to burn these 3 cows alive on this altar on
Holy
like the 26th of this month.
Well, this is the creepy thing. This is the creepy thing. This is all Mosaic law. So Moses initially did the first sacrifice where he burnt the 3 red heifers originally. These were perfect in their time, though. That's why they were given to God as a sacrifice.
That's not a story I ever heard about Moses when I was a kid.
Apparently, they still have the ashes of these 3 heifers somehow.
Sure they do.
Okay.
They don't have Lincoln's hat, but they got those fucking ashes.
But the creepier thing, like Chud said, they have to be completely perfect. They can't have any blemishes. They can't have a hair out of place. This is why it's been so hard for them to get this next kind of prophecy sacrifice ready. The freakier thing about this is they've been actively using CRISPR DNA to genetically modify perfect red heifers for the past 10 years before they found these ones. So we don't know whether these are natural red heifers or GMO red heifers.
Right.
Because every time they'd find one, they'd get them ready, they look at something and go, oh no, its hoof's slightly bent. Or, oh look, there's a grey hair there. So they've deliberately used CRISPR technology, almost inverting God's creation, air quotes, making it a man-made sacrifice. Now, would that actually be an inversion of a sacrifice for something else? That's the creepy thing about it.
I hadn't heard that layer to this onion.
Even if they're natural, okay? Even if they're natural, let's play devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
How do they know they're the only 3? Like, how do they know they're the right 3? Like it's just like when you get into religious dogma like this, like it's just such insanity. Like it's just like fucking come on. Like I'm all for creationists, right? Like if you think that the earth was created 6,000 years ago, man, more fucking power to you. You're not thinking enough about it, I don't think, but
obviously it was created last Thursday, right, Bob?
Dude, it could have been created fucking yesterday. It could have been created during the eclipse.
Well, this is a new reality. The reset today when the eclipse happened.
How can I actually prove anything before today happened?
Or 11:30 today when the eclipse happened.
I don't have I don't have anything that I would call sufficient evidence to prove that today isn't the first day of existence. I don't. I got memories. How do I prove that my memories are mine? Like,
Sure.
How do I like it goes deep into that shit, and that's how my retarded brain works. But
what you're touching on, Bob, what you're touching on is that like the whole idea of prophecies. Now, there's an issue.
Right.
Does a prophecy have to organically happen and no one intervenes?
Mhm.
Or does someone actually have to do something? And I think what we see from the elites of the world, the World Economic Forums, the CERN, all these types of people, they believe in something so much, they actively try to trigger the prophecy that's written. Now, is it really a prophecy if you're trying to make it happen? Or is it just programming?
They're the ones that fucking wrote it down. Like,
Exactly.
I've always
And they're
used
just
the
trying to come back
correlation,
to it.
like if I'm the one that writes the history before it happens, I'm not predicting it. And then like if I tell you that in fucking 7 years on March 31st of whatever fucking year that'll be, 2031, that I'm gonna eat a ham sandwich at 12:15. And then I eat a sandwich on that
let me
day.
write this down. Let me write this down.
If I eat a ham sandwich at 12:15 on that day, I didn't fucking predict the future. I made it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's like me saying I've got a steak in the fridge and I'm going to eat a steak later. So I predict for dinner today I'm going to eat a steak. When I already know it's in the fridge.
When you sit down to eat that steak, you're not like, I'm fulfilling a prophecy.
It's the prophecy.
It's fucking right. I just ask everybody to take everything with a grain of fucking salt. Like,
absolutely.
Settle down.
When I first started hearing about these red heifers a little bit back, just a couple months ago, it was coming from an Orthodox Christian who was talking about that he saw the Protestants of the United States as being eschatologists. I had to look that up. Eschaton is another word for the end times, the apocalypse, and that these eschatologists are doing what they can to bring Jesus back because they want Jesus to come back. So therefore, this was all just bullshit that this person was spewing out, but they were saying that these ranchers in Texas must be Protestant eschatologists who are trying to trigger the end times, to catapult us into the chaos through which they can then be saved by Jesus. Man, that's a hard one for me to swallow.
It's a bit of a stretch. I think the easiest one to come to is we know that the state of Israel, the biggest basis they have for that state existing is they've got the biblical historical reference. This is our land. They use a book, the Torah, to justify their nation's existence. We know they want that temple rebuilt. We know they want the entirety of Israel. They don't want Palestine at all. Mm-hmm. So they're going to use prophecy, which is from their book, to justify what they want to do in rebuilding the temple. That's all I see this is.
Right. Well, I'm going to piss a lot of people off. That's what the Holocaust nonsense was, because the 6 million number is this prophetic number. And so it's this fictitious fucking thing that didn't happen that they were trying to use. And what these fucking religious zealots need to realize is that you cannot, if this shit is real, if we are to think that the prophecies can happen, you can't make them happen. You can't force it. It's either going to happen or it's not. And if you're trying to make it happen with artificial fucking heifers or a fake fucking Holocaust, it's not going to work, man. Like, it's like, have you ever seen Army of Darkness, where he's at the fucking altar with the book and he's supposed to say the chant? He forgot the fucking words.
Nickel.
And so he makes up the fucking words as he's saying it, and he's like, like, and fucking grabs the book, right? Well, it caused something else. Like, and that may be what some of this shit is that you're fucking up and causing something else to happen. Drew wasn't what you wanted.
Drew said it with the CRISPR technology. If these are an abomination of God, not your words there, but if these cows are an abomination of God, if they're an inversion of God's creation, if this is man becoming the creator and creating his own breed of cattle especially in order to fulfill the prophecy, is this prophecy going towards God, towards the good, towards what would that be? With people talking about CERN and the eclipse, a lot of people talking about opening a portal. If the idea of sacrificing these cows in the proper way, in the proper form, would be opening a portal to be able to build that temple back. If this is the inversion of that ceremony, of that ritual, what kind of a portal could that possibly be opening up? And then furthermore, if all of this is true, who's to say that all these people who are actually doing it don't know exactly what they're doing, and that they're not genuinely looking for the opposite effect of what anybody who might be cheering them on is thinking?
What if it's so minute that we'll never know it? What if they're trying to pass one person through?
Yeah.
What if it's so minute that it's in their groups and you're never even gonna know that this shit happened, because it has no effect on large scale, but they're trying to get one entity through.
This sounds like the Omen.
One way or the other.
Another way I could see it too.
Omen. Bring him through Damien, right? That's what it seems like.
Right.
Or what if it happens and, in quotes, nothing happens, just like with the cell phone test and the eclipse, but it does trigger the rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon. But that's actually going to happen in about 1,000 years from now.
Right. But it's down the line, right?
Maybe
it is like the Omen and this evil entity came through, but we're not going to see the results of that shit in our lifetime. These controllers play the fucking long game, folks. They are thinking on millennia, not decades.
Well, and something that rolled off my tongue in a conversation with someone about this exact subject was just, I was like, and who's to say that this hasn't happened 10 times before in the last 2,000 years? Yeah. Like, we're under the impression that they've been looking for these cattle for since 70 AD. Well, bullshit. Who's to say they didn't? Hey, let's pick a date, 1811. Who's to say they didn't do the same thing in 1811, and that was right before the New Madrid earthquakes, right?
Right. And the War of 1812.
And maybe it has nothing to do with the prophecies, but maybe it is to do something completely unrelated to any of it, and they've just gotten everybody confused.
And this is how you get stuck in rabbit holes, because my next logical step with this being a schizo would be, which prominent billionaires, elites of the world were born during an eclipse?
Ooh.
That currently exist. And then go down those rabbit holes. If someone was born on a previous eclipse, maybe they're the Antichrist, maybe they're the bad guy, maybe they're something that's been ushered in through red heifers of the past.
Mm-hmm.
Like what Bob alluded to. The president of 2055 could be someone that was born, or 2075, whatever, so they're old enough to be president, was born today. And maybe that was the intention of bringing one entity.
And that soul that came through the portal that CERN opened up, that could only be opened during an eclipse, went into an infant today that will eventually do something. Like people expect these instant things because we live in this fucking instant gratification culture, right? People don't think down the line. I mean, I've dealt with that at fucking work. Where people are like, well, it's not a problem. And I'm like, it will be in 5 years. Like, yeah, it might not be a problem today, but look further fucking down the goddamn line, dude. Like, yes, this will work right now, but like, you have to realize that, like, I used to be an atheist, and I realized there is a fucking creator. I don't think it's a good creator. That's where I differ with Christians. I definitely think there is one, though. I just can't say for sure whether it's good or bad.
Could be just indifferent.
I can't make a decision whether it's good or bad, because naturally this realm is amazing. What it is now sucks donkey ass. But like the people that control this place, whether it's the creator, whether this place is a prison and it's very Escape from New York, where there's just a hierarchy inside of the prison. Regardless, the people that control this shit look way down the fucking line. They're looking hundreds of years down the line. They're not looking at the next election cycle. That's just part of the scam that is perpetuated hundreds of years down the line. They don't care. That's why Trump can fucking just be what he is. Biden can be what he is. They're playing their part in this long game that there is, you know. Like I said, the controllers, I think, want to stay. They know that shit's gonna fall apart, and they're just trying to expand that shit until it falls apart. They're just trying to stay in wealth and power and live on the high hog as long as they fucking can. These ancient, amazing buildings that we see, that was probably their buildings in the last fucking time. And they were like, fuck, I want to reach that shit again, because that was baller living in that shit. You know, like, and we got other people to build it for us. That was fucking amazing. Like, let's expand this out. And so they just want to fucking make that time as long as they possibly can, because they know eventually it's going to fall apart. There's a really fucking awesome show with Kristen Bell and Ted Danson in it called The Good Place. It's fucking amazing. And it alludes to what I'm talking about. No matter what, they eventually find out what the fuck's going on. And they just try to make that fucking time longer. They're just like, fuck, what can we do to make them not find out for a little bit longer? We know they're going to fucking find out, because they always have. And they keep throwing different shit, but they keep finding it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a show that's been given to us as an allegory to what we're fucking in. Like, they just want to expand it. They and I think we're at the point of the longest expansion, right? And the most they found out that adding this fucking computer technology and bullshit adds a fucking extra layer to things. Like, they keep learning how to distract us, divide us, to make themselves more powerful, more wealthy, and enjoy more lavish shit. And fuck, man, it's working like a charm as far as I can tell.
It's almost like a game preserve. Like, if you're a manager of a game preserve and you've got, say, white-tailed deer as your resource that people come in to hunt, you know that over time the population's going to get to a point where you're going to have more hunters come in. Or you say, I can see the numbers over the next 2 generations are going to explode, so I'm going to introduce some timber wolves. And some timber wolves over the next 2 generations will eat out the excessive numbers, and then I've got extra things to use on the property. They play this long game, and they know how, to the minute scale, because they know the system, they know the cycles, they know that fourth turning, they know the father, the mother, the infant's kind of spiral.
Yeah.
They know when to do things.
Yeah, and the whole thing is to keep an even population, essentially.
Yeah. Have you seen the Black Mirror freezer episode in the I think it's in the first season,
where it's like that fast forwarding like time frame from cavemen all the way up to
these people find out that there's a civilization in their freezer, and every time they open it, even if they just close it and open it again really fast, everything is fucking changed. It's completely fucking different. And it's this huge cycle, and then they end up blowing themselves up, but then it starts over again. Like, it didn't end. It just started over. And we're just in this perpetual recycling of shit. Like, it just
cycles, man.
Going. It just keeps going.
That's with all of my deepest discussions. I almost always, at this point in my life, I come to the conclusion that it's all cyclical, that we're going around and around and around. I love, as you know, Bob, I love playing with ideas that this is all just a simulation that started last Thursday. I love playing with different ideas. The one that I just have been coming to for like 20 years now, it seems like, is that it just keeps starting over. And I have different ways that I'm viewing that. It's very different today than it was 5 years ago. And 5 years ago was very different than 20 years ago. But I do just keep coming back to this idea that we just keep restarting. And like these days, I really feel like, I just feel like it. I don't have any proof, of course, but I feel like mankind has been around for not hundreds of thousands of years, but millions, or maybe even hundreds of millions of years. And that this has just been going on forever. And it always looks different, or it doesn't even. Maybe it even looks the same.
Maybe it
or maybe there's a bigger set of cycle within that. That's like, you know, it maybe caveman to now is correct. And then it keeps cycling in.
And then it starts over.
Right.
Like it can go caveman to like Jetson shit and then start over and or start over in kind of a, you know, like fucking Fibonacci sequence, right?
Oh, sure.
Where it's starting over, but it's doing this fucking expanding of like it just gets bigger and bigger. It's starting over, but the loops get bigger.
And that's why I'm really open-minded to what you're saying about the powers that be just trying to keep themselves in power longer and longer, but it always fizzles out somehow at some point.
I think we liken it to, and as a film that doesn't get enough credit, I think it's quite telling, Dark City. I think the people that run this realm are like the entities from Dark City, and they're trying to keep us in that cycle of dependency. But it's slight little tweaks, slight changes to things. It doesn't have to be a full reset. They just rebrand things, or they change the dominant power of the world to another. Like the British were the rulers of the world at one point. That quickly shifted to America. And before that, it was the French. And before that was the Romans. It's slight tweaking. It's not huge resets, as people tend to think they are.
The sun never sets on the Royal Empire, right? Like that's the saying, right? Well, America is basically just a British state. Like I think we're still under the fucking crown. Because George Washington was British royalty. So
yeah, I think there's room that all of these are still all the same bloodline, or
of course
the same elites from Romans and all the way through. These slight tweaks. These are slight tweaks on a surface level that we think matter. Like maybe it's going to switch now to China, or you know, like
we haven't seen the cataclysmic collapse yet. We haven't seen us reset to the Stone Age, and that's what I would consider to be a big reset. What we see is the rebranding, the repackaging, the shifting of power to different little groups.
How do we know the Stone Age actually existed?
Right.
Maybe that's some mythical thing that they just tell us to fucking trick us into this idea of evolution. And that shit never fucking actually existed. I gave
Stone Age to now as an example earlier, but you know, like really I'm thinking more these days on something like since 1811 or 1850. And that's where there was a reset, but it was a shift, you know?
Right.
It's
well, I think it was the Dark Ages.
You know, hey, you guys will like this.
If we are to be told that.
You guys are the movie guys. You guys will like this. Me and Lanny were having a discussion. We've watched way too much Toy Story around here. And it gets you know, we see it too much, so we're talking about it, and it's really fascinating. Like what I've been going over a bit in the last couple of years about the old Wild West and how that could all be fabrication. And in that you have Woody. You got Woody, right? And what's he getting replaced by? Spaceman, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like it's like we fabricated what that was, and now we're here and we're fabricating what this is now. Like we can even be fabricating it in front of our eyes. Maybe they fabricated the old Wild West in front of people's eyes, but really those people were dealing with giant stone buildings that they needed a civil war to bomb the shit out of. And
look at the movie Westworld. Like it was, the West was completely fucking created. There's a book that everybody should read called The Not So Wild West, and it's actual historical accounts of the West. And like that shit wasn't what like we've been indoctrinated by Hollywood movies to think that it was this weird thing where people fucking shot each other in bars over fucking poker games, and there were train robberies all the time, and bank robberies all the time. But that shit never it almost never happened. That has been sensationalized to just such an extreme level that people just think that that's fucking history. They just think that that's how it was when it's fucking not.
It's been programmed into us so hard. Try telling someone that it wasn't like that.
Right.
It's like trying to tell someone we didn't go to space. It's hard to do.
And so the Wild West was fake. The fucking space is fake. And so we're in this constant stage of them replacing these things. I think that's where kind of Mandela effect comes from, and these, for lack of a better term, these implanted memories. Because you can ask somebody old, hey, what was it like in the 50s? They are going to not tell you what it was like in the 50s. They're going to tell you what movies said it was like in the 50s. I don't think it was like that. I don't think it was as racist. I don't think it was as fucking crazy. Like I don't think a lot of these things are the way that we were told. And I don't think it's the way that a lot of people remember. I used to think that we could only verify history to the oldest living person. But I think it's much shorter than that. Like, I think it's to only what we can verify in the most recent future. Like, I can pick up this can, it's a can. I can put it down. I can touch this microphone, it's going to make noise. I can pick up my glasses, put them on, I'm going to see better. Other than that, anything that's in the past, I can't verify in a tangible way.
Well, all of this is captured in the Toy Story series. I'm serious.
Toy Story is crazy. My kids fucking love it.
In the first one, it's what I just said. In the second one, Woody finds out that he's actually a vintage toy, and he was part of a set of toys for a television series in the 50s. And when he asked, well, what happened to the series? Why did it go away? They said, I'll tell you in one word, Sputnik. And it's that once space moved in, the Wild West was out. And then if you just jump ahead to, I guess, the fifth movie in the series, the whole thing is a fictitious movie within their universe that is Buzz Lightyear's programming. It's the stuff that didn't happen. It's supposed to be that you're watching a movie from 1997 or whatever, which was the movie that had Buzz Lightyear in it. And Buzz Lightyear came out of that box in the first movie thinking that all the things from the last movie that didn't come out till fairly recently, that's what's supposed to have been in his mind. That's why they couldn't break him. You remember when he comes out, he thinks that he's a spaceman, and they have to, you are a toy, and that's because he's been programmed. But then if you just expand out, get away from the movies and like read into them, Woody was programmed too. All of these things are toys. They've all been programmed with a backstory, and they all believe it 100%. Like, they can't not until they're broken of it and they realize, oh, we're just toys.
It's a metaphor for the academic and historical writing of reality. Like what we see in the history books, how do we know it's occurred? Like Bob said, we are given one perspective on history of what the events have happened. They may not have even happened at all. There's a theory, like you were talking about the Old West, that there's some Indian tribes in the West, air quotes, that aren't actually from the West. So they came across through the Trail of Tears, and they left the reservations and established their own nations. It's a wild theory, but there's some things around it that make you question whether there was actually tribes in that area. Was it all a fabrication of the West with the wars with Indians and, like Bob said, the bank robbing and all this kind of wild stuff? Did it occur at all? We don't know. And we're all we've got the basis on is the people in the know, the teachers, the educators, the government. They're telling us a reality that we're just supposed to accept.
Right.
But we don't know.
Well, and I'll pick on a good friend of ours. I'll pick on Andy Rouse, because this is my problem with the fucking box saga. It can't be like all the box saga is a game of telephone, right? Like Like you can't, oh, it's oral history, so it's told in a way that it can't be altered. And like bullshit. Fucking bullshit. Like anybody can alter anything at any given time. If you tell me something and say, hey, don't change this, go tell them. And then you turn around and die or leave or whatever. How the fuck do you know what I told the next person?
I guarantee you,
we don't
I guarantee
know.
you that we altered history somewhere tonight, right? For someone that's listening that didn't know about the red heifers. I know I got things wrong. Drew, I'm sure you got something. We all got some things wrong, right? But someone heard that for the first time, and now they're going to go talk to their coworkers tomorrow, and we've altered what that history is by doing that. And that's not an accident. And that's us being, and we're all like kind of careful about that, right? You know, like we make it clear that we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I believe nothing.
The issue with oral storytelling is people think it's safe because it's handed down generation to generation. It's something that's revered by the culture. The problem is individual bias, and it happens all the time. You might be telling a story about, say, red-headed giants, but you changed them to red-headed giants because you were a redhead at the time and you thought it'd be cool to have the giants as redheads instead of blondes or instead of brunettes. It can be small little details people insert because they have a bias, and that's just a small example, that changes the story fundamentally. Like, how do we know the events of Boxarg or the events of the Bible, whatever, historically or theologically, occurred in the way that they've been handed down? Because people will change things to suit their storytelling, to suit their time, to suit their own agendas.
And that's on purpose, but people do it on accident too.
Exactly.
Right.
They just don't remember.
Well, yeah. Well, not even that. Like, if you tell me a story, right, and it's a good fucking story, and I go tell a friend of mine the story, but I say it in the way that I tell stories, not in the way that, say, Drew told me the story, but I use the exact same events, the exact same timeline, the same characters, but I just tell it in a different way.
Well, vocabulary,
it's going to be perceived in a different way. Even if you canned me a fucking script, like actors know this shit, right? Like two people can read the same exact script and play basically two different characters that read that script, right? And that's how they do casting, right? And it's like, okay, well, this dude said all the right words, but he didn't say them the way that we wanted them. This dude said them in the way that we wanted them. Okay.
The intent.
And so, and
the
so
comma.
inflection. Well, what is it, like Japan or some shit that China maybe, that if you say a word, you can say, I don't know, fucking dong, right? But if you put the emphasis on a different syllable in a word,
it means something else.
It means something completely fucking different.
If someone misses the comma, there's a big difference between don't stop doing it, I love this, don't stop doing it, and don't stop doing it, I don't like this.
Right.
And both lines are don't stop doing it.
It's that fucking line, like, let's eat grandma, let's eat, comma, grandma.
Yeah.
And it says, comma, save lives.
But it's the
or
vocabulary,
when the mayor sends the note to the executioner and says, no, there's a possible innocence, right? Like
no possible innocence.
Yeah. Which one was it? That comma, that and when you read it, when you're not looking at it, but when you're expressing that, if you don't express it in just the right way, the listener can take those two, that same set of words just completely differently.
And this is where vocabulary comes into it, Bob. If you have a greater vocabulary than I do, you can describe the story that I've given you far more vividly. And in that, it gives new words, and words have meaning and they change meaning over time. An example in Australia is our Aboriginal populations have a language called Aboriginal English. It's a mixed language, and they've given different meanings to English words. So what we would know the word as deadly as being something bad, something poisoning, something can kill you or harm you. They use deadly to mean cool, awesome, or radical. So I'm deadly, I'm cool. So they've already changed the meaning of a word, and over time, that could stick or it could completely disappear. The change in words and the vocabulary in how you use it completely changes a story from what it was originally.
Right. And that's my problem with oral shit, is because just the smallest changes can change the entire perception of the story that you're telling somebody, and then they're going to go tell it in the way they perceived it, right? Like when you get told a story, you take that in a very unique way. It's very rare that two people take one story exactly the same way. Like, Drew, you could tell a story to me and Chud right now, and you're the one telling the story, but you got two people listening, and we're going to take two different things from that story.
It's very possible. Right? It's very likely.
And then when I go retell that story, I'm going to tell it in the way that I heard it, and Chud's going to go tell it in the way that he heard it. And then if you get 10 people down the line on each strand of those, and then get those people to tell each other the story, those stories are going to be fucking different. Period. Like 100% of the time, those stories are going to be different. And so you can't guarantee that anything is accurate. No. And so that is my message to fucking everybody. Like apply that standard to fucking everything.
Well, that's religion in a nutshell, right? At the basis, nearly all religions are about creation, and they've all got a different take on it, but they all have an element of kind of a similarity or a truth in them, right?
Well, that's what I think.
It's all the same. Yeah, it's all the same.
I think they're all correct. Like I take a different stance in that they're all wrong, but that they're all correct. You know, they're all telling the same story, but there's such different interpretations over such period of time from such different cultures in such different ways that it all could be just a singular event that everyone that was alive or whatever was conscious to see. They experienced the same thing, but they all told their children. They all told their children differently.
It's all
of their children told their I'm open to that. I'm pretty open to the astro-theological point of view. I have had great discussions with the likes of David Matheson and what's his name?
Well, it's like what is it? It's in I reference a lot of movies and TV shows because I've watched so many, and it's a good way to relate what you're trying to say. But there's been numerous movies that have said it. But in this instance, it's from Hancock, where I think it's Jason Bateman's talking to Charlize Theron, and he's like, "Well, what the fuck are you?" And he's like, "Well," she's like, "Well, you know, we've been called gods, we've been called demons, we've been called angels, we've been called superheroes. It just kind of depends on the fucking time."
Yeah, and she says they're God's insurance policy.
Right. That's another one we need to add to the list because that movie is fucking awesome. I haven't seen it in a while.
There's
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just about to say that
I'm drunk and rambling.
What you're pointing out is that cinema films, they're a modern day storytelling, and often we get a glimpse into what is really going on subconsciously because we're telling these stories for a reason, and they tend to always reflect tales and mythology of the past. It's repackaged slightly. So that's like the oral storytelling changing for entertainment purposes.
Very much so, man.
Hey, remakes is another way to talk about all of this, is to say every remake is totally different. Remakes add elements to books are written first and then they're changed from the book to become a cinematic masterpiece that everybody loves. And then 20 years later, they're like, we need to remake this because it didn't do the book justice. So now we're going to do the book justice. But you know what? It's been a long time since that book was written. There is absolutely no titties in there. We're going to need to add some titty scenes to make this make sense in 2024.
There's no genderqueer characters.
There we go. That's more like it. I'm talking like it's the 90s or something.
USA Up All Night, baby.
Oh yeah, with Rhonda Shear.
Yes. Yeah.
Actually, I just heard Gilbert Godfrey also did that show, and I just heard him doing a great bit about the sun and the moon, and it was absolutely awesome. It was being posted because of the eclipse, but he was talking about how there's that special time when you see the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time, and he does the voices for the two of them arguing about who owns the sky at that time. And I thought it was great because it really shows, Bob, we've talked about it a bunch of times. A lot of people don't even realize that happens every month. Every month they're out at the same time, like twice in every month, like 2 portions of the month. Most of the time we're seeing them at the same time. But we have this idea in our head that the sun goes down and the moon comes up, and that they're on opposite sides.
I had that fucking debate with Donunaki Dan, where he actually thought that the sun and the moon were always 180 degrees apart.
Yeah, he thought that the phases of the moon were caused by the shadow of the earth.
I was like, fuck, dude, if you think the sun and the moon are always 180 degrees apart, we can't.
Respect for all my fellow podcasters out there.
With you.
But I was really surprised to hear anyone in a truther-like movement or a truther-like position to be so unwell informed of the model that we're told.
Just of observable
to come on and debate about that and not... I don't know.
Well, you'd think if you're coming in on any position for a debate, you think you'd do your homework, or you'd have the base knowledge already, right?
At least know what observable reality is. Like, and I use that term loosely, right? Because reality, who can really define it, right? Like, what is reality?
It's a tough one.
Is reality what I can hold on to, what I can grab, what I can move around? Is it what I'm experiencing now? Is it what I remember? Is it like, what is fucking reality? And I think we can be in a simulation and reality at the same time.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna wrap this up here because I'm gonna ask you guys this question. Is this reality right now? Is this reality?
Yeah,
because I think without question, what we're doing is a simulation. What the three of us are doing right now,
of course,
we're first, each of us individually, we're simulating having a conversation with our friends because you guys aren't here in my basement with me and I'm not with you guys, right? So we're simulating that. And then we're going to, in a couple days from now, this is going to come out over the internet for people to then listen to on a device through headphones. They're not going to hear our voices. They're going to hear simulations of our voices when we sat here and simulated having a conversation with each other. Is this real? Are we in reality right now? Like, can we even say that with definitively? I don't think we can.
I think reality is what you're experiencing currently.
Okay.
So it's all reality. Reality is perspective. It's not a place. It's not a time. Reality is your perspective of the current moment.
Okay.
If I had to put a definition on it,
I'll take that. Like, because, I say, I don't know that it is, but I accept that as an answer. Absolutely. Like, because obviously we're having this conversation, right? Like we are, right?
Are we though?
Wait, hold on.
Because I could be on a hospital bed after a car accident.
I just broke my
this
brain
could
again.
all be a fucking dream, dude.
I could be on a bench talking to ducks at the park for all I know.
Right. You could be zoning out. Like, it's very much like the movie Soul, right? Like, or wait, is it Soul where you just like you jump into, once you go into like your days, you jump into a different thing? I think it's the Disney movie Soul.
Or we could all be laying in pods as batteries, and we all think and we all think that we're living in these realities that we live in, and then we jump out of our realities that we think that we're living in order to have these simulated conversations in order to give them to people on another level.
Reality is the world we're experiencing right now until it's not.
Okay.
And then what we're experiencing now, like if we were to wake up like Neo in the Matrix, then that would become our reality, and what we are experiencing right now would be the simulation, right? Like, and then, but then that could be very much like Inception, where it's multiple layers of the simulation. So that's a whole nother podcast though. Like, I'm drunk and high.
Yeah,
and
I thought I'd end with a little bit of fun
night about this
Drew,
shit.
you nodded along with a lot of this, but what are your thoughts on that? Does it just break your brain, or do you care? What do you think?
It does a little bit, because I'm open to anything at this point, but I think Bob kind of really hits it. And to drive it home, reality is down to the individual. It's your experiences, your perspectives, how do you view the world, and how you interact with it. I don't know. I could have been interacting with Bob for the past, 2 or 3 years. He could be completely AI for all I know. I haven't met him physically in person. It's only been via a screen. Mm-hmm. Same for you, Chud. I don't know. You could be Chud X2000, the brand new AI by Copilot or by Twitter, whatever. It's all my reality is dictated by what I experience.
Right.
And that has to be at hand. It has to be physical. It has to be tangible. It has to be observable reality for me. Mm-hmm. There's questions about, I even question the Daily News. They show me a story. Yeah, cool. They say that happened, but I wasn't there to see the car crash. They're showing me a video.
Right.
I don't know if that's a real thing.
It's one of my favorite lines from a Negative Land song. They say, "You must remember that you have never seen a dead body on television. It has only ever been a simulation." And that's very true. No one has ever seen, I'll take it a step further and say, no one has ever seen anything on the news. They've only seen a simulation.
Right.
And, all right. Well, are we content, guys?
I'm fucking very content. I was
we got all three of us just thinking for a second. We all have to think. That's a good point to stop.
Fuck yeah, man. Always a pleasure, guys.
Yeah, Drew, since you're a guest, would you like to tell everyone where they can find you?
Sure can. Drew, Missing from Your Missing the Point podcast and Conspiracy Theater 3000. We are a little bit behind, guys. Life gets in the way, but we do have a couple of ideas down the pipeline. So looking forward to recording with Bob again. Have a look for those. I've also opened up a merch store. Just got a couple of cool designs and stuff on there. As you know, my listeners, I don't charge for my show at all. All the episodes are free. But if you do want to support the show, I'd like you to get something out of that. And that's in the way of shirts, posters, calendars, all that type of stuff. So go check it out.
Yeah, I've been seeing that merch come through on your Instagram. It looks stellar. I love it.
Thanks, mate.
All right. Yeah, well, with that, I will bid you adieu.
Later, man.
See ya.
Once when we were on a bus between some cities, we discussed the things that happened in their early years. Their youngest time was spent alone while living with an uncle, only half remaining from a foreign war. His upper half was well enough, but in his legs, between his cuffs and where his zipper stopped, his legs were gone. So he rolled around on wheels, self-sufficient in a peeling little house he could not paint again. But it was spotless to a point, 2 feet above the floor, and warmth was in his smile. In his laughing face. The people that they met were few, might have been disturbed by two that looked so strange, but they're not aware. For living with their stumpy uncle, who was unconcerned and rumpled, made them see things differently. They thought that we were put together randomly, just like the weather, with no uniformity in mind. But that vision only lasted for a while, until he passed away and they were sent off to a home. The children there did not have parents, and were all alike and always staring as they sat on chairs above the ground. So they cried and then withdrew from those that shouted, laughed, and who were mean because of suffering inside. Once alone, they heard some children shouting that a car had killed one of their pets out in the road ahead. As they approached the fallen body, blood appeared, and then they saw a leg that had been torn away somehow. So they kneeled upon the ground and lifted up the leg they found and wedged it gently just below the spot where both their shoulders joined together. Then the sun, which had been setting, winked. All was dark, and when the sun returned above them, no one laughed and made fun of them, for the dog was licking at the joint, barking loud and resurrected, and causing them to be respected by those who had avoided them before.